Live to Sydney now. The Energy Minister, Chris Bowen, is speaking. He's been announcing these next steps for a community energy upgrade fund. He's taking other questions from the media now. Let's listen in.
So, of course, projects will encounter some challenges. Snowy 2.0 has encountered delays and cost increases, of course. That's just one example. And, you know, I've said previously that more work should have been done when Snowy 2.0 was commissioned to ensure the costing was accurate by previous Snowy management. But nevertheless, it remains a very important project, and renewable energy, in all the evidence independently examined by the CSIRO and AEMO, is the cheapest form of energy, taking into account all the costs, and the opposition has some explaining to do about whether they will stick with their nuclear fantasy.
Just a follow-up. The Defence Minister has today confirmed we won't be sending a ship to the Middle East. Do you sort of agree with that, and why was there such a delay in making that announcement?
Well, of course, any matter like this receives full consideration of the government. We take time to work the issues through and consider the pros and cons. Of course, this is the right decision for Australia's national interests and values. We are focused on our region in terms of our efforts, but of course we provide diplomatic support for the efforts in other regions, and this is an appropriate decision after due consideration by the government and relevant ministers.
And just finally, politicians' spending data's come out. Do you think politicians need to be mindful that we're in a cost of living crisis and to make sure that their spending is appropriate?
Yes, and I think politicians do, and I think that's frankly the case across the board. This is not a partisan matter. Members of Parliament need to travel around Australia. That's part of our job. It's not a part of our job that is particularly people look to do. You know, we are required to work in every state and territory. As a federal politician, we are required to get around the country. We're required to run our electorate offices and provide support to people, and that does require the dedication of government funds. But of course, all decisions should be made with a view to the best interests of the taxpayer in going about that business. I think the vast majority of members of Parliament across the board do that, and that's reflected in the fact that MPs make decisions about the best use of taxpayers' money every day.
The opposition's been critical of Richard Marles and the Prime Minister for using Air Force jets to travel when they say there's commercial alternatives. Do you think that's a fair criticism?
No. I mean, the Prime Minister is required to travel by Air Force as a matter of security. The Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Defence has very onerous responsibilities right across Australia and internationally. I mean, he has to visit defence facilities in remote Australia. He has to engage with counterparts, and of course, he travels commercial when it's appropriate. He travels with the Air Force when it's appropriate. Peter Dutton would have been the same when he was Defence Minister. He would have used the Air Force when he was Defence Minister and Home Affairs Minister. He requests the Prime Minister to have access to the Air Force as the Leader of the Opposition. He sends in requests to use the Air Force. So apparently he thinks it's okay for him, but not okay for the current Defence Minister to use the Air Force. I mean, you know, if the opposition is going to start politicising these matters, they need to be very careful because, as I said, I think politicians across the board are appropriate in their use of government resources, whether they be in the opposition or the government. And if the opposition thinks likewise, they need to be very careful about their attacks because they have used the Air Force when they were in office and they seek to use the Air Force from opposition.
That's all my questions. Thanks, Minister.
Very good. I think we're all done. Thanks, everyone.